Yay! We are live once again, or I guess I should say Mr. S, Professor Ron, is live, hosting another session for music appreciation. Okay, so for today's session, I wanted to have a class, a session, you know, get something here, on YouTube to make sure everyone feels really ready and prepared for the if I can say this right, music appreciation final exam review. Let's hope I can talk today. We have a lot of stuff to cover. At any rate, if you're watching this, you might just want a little extra help at music appreciation. Maybe you're scared, maybe you're worried, maybe you're stressed, maybe you're just having an awesome time in the class and you just want to go through the material. Final exams are not meant to be scary or I gotcha. Final exams are not meant to be where it's just so impossibly hard that final exams should be the celebration. And that might sound weird saying, but man, if you've really worked hard in the class, final exams should be pretty cool, should be pretty fun. But I'd readily admit that, some final exams for many courses can be pretty tough. And my hope is that music appreciation, that by doing this for students that are in my face-to-face classes, students that are in my, fully online classes or hybrid classes, that this will help you feel pretty awesome about the exam. So I suppose the disclaimer here needs to be that while I'm going to give you the question, some of the questions and all of the main content on the music appreciation final exam, there's not enough time for me to rehash or to go through fully all of the topics discussed with the Baroque and Classical period. So for anybody watching this that's hungry for more information, like, oh, he didn't explain this, that, or whatever. Well, I have gone through painstakingly for hours, multiple lectures on the Baroque era, the Classical era, and pretty much everything that I teach in the music appreciation course. So if you're hungry for more and that hunger is not satisfied through a review session, please go reference the videos and I'll make sure to link those in this music appreciation final exam review. So for those that kind of stumbled upon this video, like, I want to know more about Mozart. He's just saying like a couple things. I feel you and I appreciate it, share the love on all that. Okay, so before I get into the full-on final exam, some basics, all right? As I said, I want this to be fun. I want the exam to be fun, but I recognize that for some this is going to be a challenge. It's kind of all relative. But on the real, I mean, as I said, I understand, like, exams are not fun for everybody, and we're all like, we all like and have different skills and enjoy and do different things. But we all, if you're taking a music appreciation class, I think the fact of the matter or point is, I care about all my students and I want you to do really awesome on the exam. And I think one of the things that can help you to ease any frustrations or worries in any kind of, elective course in music appreciation would just be, let's talk about how to prepare for the exam and let's get through the material. So, all right, I've rant and raved on that too much, but what you're going to see is me on the screen right now and then just a splash screen. This splash screen that you're seeing, this is my development shell. It's my, music appreciation, basically where I get classes ready every semester. So you're not going to see your individual actual class. I'm not going to break confidentiality and show any other actual classes or students or anything like that. I'm just going to show a splash screen so you can see, hey, this is music appreciation and it's me. So this is more like a video/podcast. You could listen to this on the go as more an audio thing. Don't necessarily, but I'm doing it through video so you can watch and or listen. When I'm going through the content on the final exam, I will have tons of notes, but you won't be able to see those on the screen. That would actually give everything that's on the exam away. So by all means, whenever you're watching this, make sure that you get some really good notes, of course, what you need to do great and be successful. I believe in you, believe in yourself, work hard, study hard, pay attention, get good notes, and you'll do awesome. Now, we're almost there. I've got my clipboard. Maybe I'll make the video kind of sort of. And then, of course, I've got my tons of digital notes on the computer. All right, so I'm going to go through some things on the clipboard here. I think the important part is lecture notes. If you've got really good lecture notes, you're going to do great, in the class. So if you break the lecture notes down really into 5 core component areas. Number 1, that's going to be your vocabulary list. Number 2, stories behind the music. Number 3 is going to be listening guides to the music. Number 4, music examples. Number 5, quotes. That's what you're going for. So if you have really good lecture notes, and those have been broken down into vocabulary, stories, listening guides, music examples, and quotes, you are good to go. I know I'm restating that a couple times, but I can't rant and rave on that enough that getting organized is going to be the bigger part of the battle and having success on this final exam. Please take your time to organize your lecture notes into those 5 core component areas. All right, the other thing is ed puzzles. They have practice quizzes, so make sure you do those. The only things that the ed puzzles don't have is going to be, like something maybe I said in a live classroom. So ed puzzles are going to have everything but class discussions, or there'll be questions from a live lecture that won't be in the ed puzzle because live lectures are organic. They're straight up. I will have poll questions, quiz questions that come from testing if it was a live class where you paying attention to that. But ed puzzles have most of the material. So the ed puzzles are great to do for your practice, basically your practice quizzes. But in terms of journals and Padlets, the assignments like live class discussions, journals, Padlets, or maybe a few extra stories or a few little, few little things I might sprinkle into a lecture will make their way into midterm and final exams. So we want to keep that in mind. That ed puzzles don't have everything. The ed puzzles don't have all the assignments, class discussions. They have the main content from the lecture, but when you're doing, say, like a journal in my class or a Padlet in my class, I don't put that stuff on the ed puzzles because the ed puzzles are just testing on individual lectures. They're practice quizzes on individual lectures, basically. So if you're doing ed puzzle so-and-so on, Mozart or whatever the lecture is, it's like Mozart, maybe sonata and concerto, and you do an ed puzzle quiz on that, it's only testing on that one lecture or video. But when you get to the midterm or final, you're being tested on those ed puzzle questions come back, but then all the journals, or your question on the journals, your question on the Padlets, class discussions, the organic class discussions, things will come up that we talked about in class and make their way into those midterms and finals. And it's not ever to get you. It's just to make sure you're paying attention and engaged, and just really that you were truly and honestly learning something. So I guess the first part of this live stream is just kind of getting us in the frame of mind before I get to all the content. Okay, so I think we're ready. That's basically the end of my intro. Now I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty of the music appreciation final exam review session. Okay, let's jump into it. I'm moving some digital notes around, which I said in the first part you can't see. So, okay. All right, so what I was saying earlier, I'll remind you again as we've started here. I've read my clipboard notes. My clipboard notes are basically pointers to get you organized in terms of study preparation. Now on my computer screen, you're seeing me, as I said, you're seeing the music appreciation splash screen, just a generic one I might add. And also on my computer screen, I'm actually looking at the real final exam. I'm just going to go through the entire final exam, but I'm not going to show it. So your job right now, whether you're watching now or later, and anybody that's here joining the live stream, awesome, thank you. Please, anybody here live, share a few comments in the live stream chat, whether you're enrolled in my class, you want to be enrolled in my class, or just found the channel checking out some music. Either way, prospective student, current student, or passerby, please share some comments, and I'll find some time to chime in. We got 100 questions to go through, so we want to treat it as like you're with me in the class. While it's not completely two-sided this way, certainly can chime in the comments. All right, so question 1. In the class, we've talked about fugues, starting with the hardest question probably. You need to be able to match fugal terms. And this can be a challenge because I ask you, you know, what are all the fugal terms? So you need to be able to match the following fugal terms as discussed. And this would be, I talked about this in Music Appreciation Lecture 9, The Life and Music of J.S. Bach. So I talked about inversion, I talked about retrograde, I talked about retrograde inversion, talked about augmentation, diminution. Of course, we're talking, I mean, fugue is the big thing we're talking about. Stretto, subject, episodes. So what you're trying to do, and while I'm happy to, question 1 through question 100, I guess I'll keep that flow. Anybody that takes my final exams, everything gets jumbled. There's no guarantee any number stays in your number, so you do get answers mixed and match. So you'll take my final exam on honor lock. All my classes will use honor lock, and questions get jumbled, answers get jumbled, that kind of thing. There can be wordings of questions that get changed through a pooling, where I've got similar questions, but maybe a little bit different wording to keep keep high academic integrity, but of course fairness. Of course, very very fair. I promise. I promise. Okay, so you want to know that inversion. Well, first, if I'm asking you about fugue, let me just tell you. For the first main big question of understanding the content in the question, where when we talk about a fugue is a polyphonic composition. It has a main subject and there's imitation. So when we have a fugue, typically we're going to have, 2 or more melodies. You could say a double melody, 2 melodies. Fugue is, when we say polyphonic, if it's polyphonic, we've got at least 2 melodies happening. And the main subject really is, like when we say subject in a fugue, that is a melody. And when we have imitation, it's like, you've got a melody in a fugue that kicks it off. And then before that melody finishes, a counter subject or counter melody would interrupt and overlap. But it could also be clean cut. You could also have a fugue where you got a fugue and you've got a fugue's got to have a main melody, right? So a fugue's got to have a main melody, again, which the main melody we call a subject. And then that counter subject or counter melody either is going to overlap the melody, kind of like if I can bring my hands up, where you have a melody like this, and then it might be clean cut where that melody finishes, and then the counter melody comes in right at the end, but the main melody would keep going. So it's not like it takes over. There's a melody, and then that counter subject, counter melody will interrupt, and it ends up being overlapping, and then you've got those melodies are continuing together. I'm going to turn my hands like that or whatever, but so important to know the basics of just like what is a fugue. That when we talk about polyphonic music, there's you got 2 or more melodies at the same time, and a fugue is polyphonic. And main subject, we're talking about a melody. Imitation can be clear, clean cut. It can be overlapping. Probably already given way too much over review on like fugue, but I think you want a really great example. Listen to J.S. Bach's organ fugue in G minor is a great place to really wrap your head around this. And then the terms for fugue, if we keep going through from fugue and then all the other stuff that you need to know, like when you have an inversion in a fugue, inversion is turned upside down. The intervals of the original version are maintained, but are in the opposite direction. If you have a retrograde in a fugue, the pitches are stated backward, starting from the last note and proceeding to the first. If you have retrograde inversion in a fugue, the pitches are stated backward, and the intervals again keep their numeric value, but move in the opposite direction. If we have augmentation in a fugue, it's when the melody is presented in longer time values, often twice as slow as the original. When you have diminution, this is shorter note durations. All right. stretto, which I've talked about, it's stretto. It's different voices present theme in close succession, if I can say that right. Stretto, different voices present theme in close succession. So we talk about stretto as like an interruption. So I think I was showing earlier, if I put my hand up correctly where you can see, and then I've got the main melody, the stretto would be that interruption where if it's clean cut, it still can be imitation clean cut, but if it's a stretto, it's going to be an interruption. So I think we're good with all these terms, subject, melody, melody, subject. We don't want to be, let's just say we don't want to be distracted necessarily by episodes like fugues do. Of course, yes, fugues have episodes. In a fugue, we have episodes. They're basically these interludes between statements of the subject that serve as areas of relaxation. I think sometimes in fugues, you hear all these episodes and interludes, and then you're like, okay, well, it might sound like improvisation to you. It might sound like, well, we lost the melody. It's not that you're wrong necessarily. It's not improvisation, but I can get why students can sometimes think that. But there are times in fugues where they can be so dense or advanced. You're just like, whoa, okay, so this is the relaxing part. I'm kind of lost, or in this particular part, I can't hear that, the main melody. It's not there anymore. And you might be right. It's possible that there are moments where there's going to be some repose or breaks, and you can hear this in in lots of different fugues. So when you're trying to ferret out and figure out all the vocabulary words, the episodes they're not meant to be distractors or confusing at all. It's just it's something else really cool that we have in fugues, where they are interludes. Episodes are interludes, and they're basically between statements of the subjects. But what we mean is those interludes, the episodes that are interludes between statements of the subjects. We mean that those are the things that basically happen in between the melody, So, and then you get back to the melody. So when we say things like episodes and fugues, the episodes are interludes between statements. What we mean is it's it's the musical things that are happening in between the main melody or melodies of the fugue. It's those in between things. So, and we say areas of relaxation. I suppose to each their own. That's the goal of the idea behind this. And then more and more you get comfortable with fugues. This does start to make sense. I'm starting probably with one of the hardest things I could do. This might be the longest first question ever in the history of any of my exam reviews. I promise some of these take like all of a millisecond, but that's everything you need to know on the first question. All right, let's go to question 2. Question 2. So if I were sitting in class, I would say, all right, class, question 2 was, I would say, J.S. Bach was successful under the patronage system. Is it true or is it false? And I hope that you could answer that question, true or false. Just a moment ago, I had a question that it was basically matching, so you have to know those vocabulary words to match them together. But on this one, you need to know, was J.S. Bach successful? The answer is yes. It's true. So J.S. Bach has an awesome record of working for a duke and working for a prince. And while he spent the latter part of his life working for the church, he is one of our most successful musicians and composers, working both under patronage as well as working for his dream job, working for the church in the latter part of his life. So make sure to revisit the Bach lecture for more details if you need some more of that information. Okay. Let's go to question 3. What was the quote shared at the end of Music Appreciation Lecture 9, The Life and Music of J.S. Bach? There's a lot of quotes I share in the class, and I will say as I go through all 100 questions, which is not something I normally do, but hopefully something where you feel like you're in the class with me. Because if I was in class with you, that I would go through, it's basically what I'd do. If I was in class with you right now and I had hundreds of students, I would say what I just said. What was the quote shared at the end of Music Appreciation Lecture 9, Live Music of J.S. Bach? Okay, I'm repeating myself. Yeah, got it. And then as students, you would be trying to find that quote. You would go back. I would wait for you in the class to go back to either the PowerPoint or the Ed puzzle, because I want to say this over and over again throughout this whole session. Finding the answer is more important than the answer itself. So the quote in Lecture 9 was, Bach helps us to hear the voice of God, but in human form, ironing out the imperfections of humanity in the perfection of his music. There you go. All right, so that takes us through question 1, 2, 3. All right, question 4. Bach's music fell out of favor and was almost lost until what? This is a tough one, because we need to remember that we almost lost Bach for many, many, many moons. And at the time, Felix Mendelssohn got a hold of a composition. This is St. Matthew's Passion, I believe, around 1829. It was programmed. People were like blown away by this. Like Felix Mendelssohn and the family really helped to revive, Bach's music. I mean, we lost Bach's music for years upon years. And Felix Mendelssohn and the family really dig into, get a hold of all of Bach's music, and Mendelssohn programs Bach's St. Matthew's Passion, and everyone's just like, they're just blown away. They're blown away by the awesomeness of this music. So we definitely have, Mendelssohn to thank for this, for sure. So that's really important. On question 5, at least for the review session, this could be question but for our next question, who ran Bach Incorporated? I've talked about in all my live classes, in all of them, that it's very important to remember all the help that people had in their upbringing. So we need to know that Anna Magdalena, who ran Bach Incorporated, this is important because Bach, he couldn't do it by himself. Bach had to write music and had to do all the rehearsals for multiple churches. And Anna, who was just as awesome and amazing musician as Bach. I mean, she was a singer, writer, composer. She could transcribe stuff. She was incredible. They both lived for the Lord and were very religious and compatible. Just a great, loving couple. And Anna Magdalena gave up her career to help Bach. And Bach Incorporated is basically where Anna, Bach would get all the music preparations ready to go, whether it was skeletons, sketches, or however much he had written or whatever. He'd write the music, ideas, skeletons, notes, whatever he had ready to give, he would hand all that stuff to Anna. And then Anna would give out all the writing and copying assignments to their children and, of course, Bach's students. And they would get those things ready for, the multiple churches and rehearsals that Bach had to prepare all the musical, groups to get, ready to go, choir singers, music groups, all that stuff. So got to give Anna Magdalena the shout out on that one for sure. Okay. Question 6. What are the possible reasons as to why King George II stood for the Hallelujah Chorus? Now, I'll reiterate on question 6, as this is going to speed up here in a few minutes because they're not all super long-winded. But this is not linear or sequential. So as you're listening, no matter when you're listening, I'll remind you about a few things. I'm just looking at my exam, and you're seeing the splash screen. So I'm going in order of my exam, but it may not all be linear, sequential, or chronological. So just stay with me, okay? And remember, the questions I'm reading are from my order. They're going to all get jumbled. It doesn't matter what number I give you. There's 100 questions. I will read them all, but yours will be completely a different order. The answers will be different order, and the questions will be different order. But the most important thing about this session is you get the content, okay? All right. So King George II stood for the Hallelujah Chorus. What did King George, was he, he stood in reverence for the sentiment expressed? Was his gout acting up? Did he even have gout? Was he, stretching his legs? Was he snoozing and jarred awake by the loud opening? Um, it's maybe it's one of these, maybe it's all of these. I would say it could be possibly anything on this list. We just don't know for sure. So if you have to choose, if I say, A, B, C, or D, and one of the things says everything on this list, you probably should consider that it might actually be everything on the list, because even when you Google it, we don't know for sure. We know that there's three possibilities. He was moved. He had some kind of chronic issue and had to stretch his legs, or maybe was sleeping and jarred awake by the loud opening. So possibly a lot of all these things, or really any of these things. And instead of everything, I should have said, all these possibilities. I could reword that, but pretty much everything on this list is a possibility. Question 7. Handel's father was a barber surgeon and encouraged musical study at the university. Okay. Let's check this out. And maybe I should change this one. Handel's father was a barber surgeon, encouraged musical study at the university. So we talked about this in class. I may want to pull that up, in the lecture notes. This one gets interesting. I think the barber surgeon is it's already quite interesting for the barber surgeon. Let me go to some notes here. Take just a moment. Okay, I'm going to pull up some STC music courses, lectures, and we're going to go to, you can't see it right now, but I'm going to navigate to some external notes. Okay. Awesome. Thanks for your patience on that. So this is where it gets interesting, and I think on this one, I may change this one, because you heard me talk about in class about Handel, and that when we talked about barber surgeons, that common European medical practitioner of the times, care for soldiers. Surgery was not carried out by a doctor, but by barbers who had razors and were dexterous, really indispensable. Barber surgeons would cut hair, pull teeth, amputating limbs. I'm really just referencing from a previous lecture. But the reason I'm doing that right now live, even takes an extra minute, because maybe I need to change this one question. Because when I say Handel's father was a barber surgeon, that part, it is correct, it is true. But when we talk about musical study at the university, maybe I need to change this one, because Handel, the one on the music is forbidden story in the class, I talked about Handel's maybe between 7 and 9. His father goes to Weissenfels. Handel made his way to the court organ. Duke hears him play and is blown away. And the Duke, he's like recommending that Handel be given musical training. Handel's father relents, but Handel's father was he was not all about music. So he definitely gets on board with the whole music thing. You've heard me talk about before with Handel, like, when you look at, we go to like the keyboard in the attic story where, Handel's aunt smuggles a clavichord in the attic so he can study, music in secret, try to keep it a secret, from his dad or whoever. So his dad wasn't super supportive in in all the music stuff in the beginning, but basically ends up kind of having to relent, or give into this. So maybe I'll need to change that one a little bit. So on this question, it's basically saying true or false, but it's a little more complicated. So for question 7, when it says Handel's father was a barber surgeon and encouraged musical study at the university, it's true and it's false, kind of, sort of. I'll fix that one. since I'm doing this live and you're listening. And if you're listening after the fact, I've probably, depending on when you watch this video, I'll have already updated that question to make sure that it's all good. But in the beginning, Handel's father wasn't super supportive of the whole music thing. But after the trip story that I kind of just reiterated, Handel's father does like, all right, cool, I guess we're going to have to do this now and have a choice. Let's go to question 8, and I'll make sure to adjust that question for the Handel's father, barber surgeon, and study. I'll adjust that question on the exam, and on future exams, I'll make sure to make that adjustment. On question 8, music making became centered in the home, church, and university rather than in the salons of the aristocracy. That's definitely true. This becomes a big thing. Music making becomes a really, really big thing, and music making is not just in some rich person's house. Music making is not just for kings, queens, dukes, and duchesses. Music making is not just for aristocracy. Music making really starts to take off, and people want to make music at home. People want to enjoy music. It's music making becoming centered in the home, church, and university. It just really starts to blossom out. This is a very, very cool thing for music. All right, that's question 8. Let's take a few questions on Padlets. Okay, so I'm going to close some of those external notes. Yeah, the one reason I wanted to double check the Handel stuff is really more so the wording. Okay. Oh, yes, I see some of the comments. Thank you for all the comments, everybody. Yeah, this is meant to be public. Okay, I see something about Axel F. Played Axel F in my concert in Malitzed. Okay, cool. I'll have to get back on this Axel F thing. That's not pertaining to this class, but Chuck Main Official, thank you for jumping in on the Axel F. I can come back and buzz you a message on that later. Yes, I see open to the public. Yeah, yes. Yes, I'm aware. Thank you. And cheers to you too, NA. I'll come back to the XLF thing a little bit later. I can send a message on that. And I always want my lectures and review sessions to be for anybody that wants to watch them. Who knows, there could be students all over the world that want to know a little bit about music appreciation. And while it's just me with the splash screen, there might be some cool stuff that they'll learn. I hope so. But thank you for Chuck Main Official and NA chime in on that. But glad to have you. Thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it. Okay. The Padlets. We're on question 9. So for question 9, what we're looking at is Padlet 3. In Padlet 3, Stradivarius violins, who is the founder of the New York Philharmonic? Now, while I guess you could Google this, you don't want to be tricked by Louis Support, Joseph Curtin, Arnulfo Lapierre, or you want to know Urelli Corelli is the founder of the New York Philharmonic. So don't be tricked by the other names. All right, question 10. In Padlet 3, Stradivarius violins, who is one of the researchers in the study? And you'll see different names, and hopefully you remember the name or at least recognize. But we want to remember that the name that you should be thinking about is going to be Joseph Curtin. You want to remember who is Joseph Curtin. Don't be tricked by other people. I think the point of this is when you're doing a Padlet assignment. In my class, Padlets are participatory. The thing about the Padlets specifically is remembering very key things from the Padlets. So when you actually did the Stradivarius violin Padlet assignment, you were sharing what you learned on the Padlet as a participation assignment in a live class discussion and also on the Padlet app. But on the final exam, you've actually got to show me, hey, do you know? Now we talk about this in class, but you got to show on the big exams that you were really paid attention to the details on the Padlets. So make sure we know that Joseph Curtin is one of the researchers in the study. So that was number 10. All right, so we're good on number 9, Urelli Corelli, New York Phil. Number 10, Stradivarius violins, Joseph Curtin. Number 11, for Padlet 3, Stradivarius violins. Who is the assistant concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic? At least at the time of that particular video, I did not Google before I went live to discount double check. But at the time of the Stradivarius violin YouTube video from back, I was years ago, at that particular time, her name was Michelle Kim. So we're talking about from the video, who it was. Okay, that was number 11. For number 12, in Padlet 3, Stradivarius violins. What was the name of the violinist at the beginning of the video? Sorry. Well, before I tell you the name, obviously you can get that from the Ed Puzzle. You can get that from watching the YouTube video. You can get that from listening to, depending on which lectures you're listening to, because I do have different class lectures, hybrid, online, face-to-face, as you've heard me talk about. The point in this one is to pay attention to details of, like, I'm trying to show you, like, hey, when you're checking out a video, pay attention to names and places and facts and figures and stories. And I think at this point you're really used to the flow of, like, learning in this kind of class. So Philippe Kint, or it looked like Quint Kint. So make sure we get that on number 12. Question 13. In Padlet 3, Stradivarius violins, what was the name of the violin? Was it amber? Was it rose? Was it diamond? Or was it ruby? Well, of course, it had to be ruby. Okay, it had to be ruby. So I want to keep that on lockdown for number 13. All right, picking it up here on question 14. This is an easy one. If I was in class with you right now and I had hundreds of students, I could have maybe 28 students or 12 students, or if it was hundreds in a huge lecture hall, I would say, all right, class, the Baroque era is from when to when? And then someone was saying, oh, I got this. The Baroque era is from 1600 to 1750. And I would say, winner, chicken dinner. You're on it. Okay. Baroque era, question 14, 1600 to 1750. All right. Question 15. If we had to put one word to the Baroque era, what would it be? This is a tough one to answer. When we talk about the Baroque era and that one word, while it's maybe oversimplification, to me, when I look at the art, the architecture, when you listen to the music, when you look at how people dressed, layers of clothes, ceilings, staircases, when you just look at everything in totality from the times, to me, the biggest thing is, decoration, or really thinking about it as decorative. I hope that does it enough justice, but I think when you really look at all those things that I talked about and so many more, decoration, ornate, decorative, really, if you only have to choose one, it's hard to choose just one, I know, but I can only ask you so much in this kind of situation. So Baroque era is decorative. Keep in mind how things connect in terms of, if you imagine the Baroque era decoration, decorative, and you imagine a grand ballroom of maybe a prince or a house of a prince or whoever, and you've got this decorated staircase and ceilings painted and creatures on the staircase, and think about how the layers and how people dressed, and the architecture and the painting and the kind of things you would see in the music, the kind of things you would hear maybe in Baroque opera in terms of, like, ornamentations on when they would repeat a phrase and add some spice, pizzazz, ornamentation to things, which we've talked about in class. So this is just a little bit of trying to get us in the frame of mind of Baroque and what's the one word? Decorative. All right. Number 16, the first era of Western music history in which instrumental music was as important as vocal music. Well, that's the Baroque. It's what we've been talking about. Baroque era, 1600 to 1750, and it's the first era of Western music history in which instrumental music was as important as vocal music. Very important. All right, that was number 16. All right, question 17. So we talked about in class the doctrine of the affections. And basically this is the doctrine of the affections. We're talking about the codification of basic emotional states aroused by music. Now, it sounds like fancy and complicated, but it's not. It was just a way to say, hey, if the piece, if we've got a happy piece, it's more than likely going to start happy and end happy. Now, whether it's ruminative or happy or sad or calm, whatever color or affection or mood that the music was, it was pretty rounded. So It was basically a way for the music um, to look at the music and say, hey, like this music is going to be this mood or emotion. And Baroque music was pretty big into affections and emotions, and but also keeping it more stable. And this is going to change when we get into the classical and the romantic era. But I think the wording of like, or just when you see something like Doctrine of the Affections, and you can Google it all you want and read about it all you want, but the best thing to do is remember the music we discussed in class and how it sounded when you listen to the music. All right? So let's keep that in mind. Question 18. In the Baroque era, we saw the rise of the middle class, we saw the rise of instrumental music, but we also saw the rise of the female professional singer. And you're going to have to know some of those names from different singers. But for now, it's just important to know that we saw the rise of a lot of things. It's not just the rise of the middle class, instrumental music, and female professional singer. I mean, we get, uh, major and minor scales, our notation system. We get the sequence. We get we're going to get public concert halls relatively soon. There's a lot of really cool things happening. So let's keep that in mind on question 18 in terms of this is more of a statement where you're trying to figure out, okay, what are the things that are on the rise or being creative or thought of in the Baroque era. All right. For question 19, you want to know the keyboard instruments of the Baroque era. So we want to know that in the Baroque era, we've got organ, we've got clavichord, and we've got harpsichord. So let's keep those in mind. And you'd be correct to like, wait a second, where's the piano? Okay, so yes, the piano is invented at the tail end of the Baroque. It's basically a modification of the harpsichord, and people aren't feeling it and are not liking it too much. But eventually the piano is going to take off in the classical period. But we do have, a modification of the harpsichord, a Baroque piano, if you will, and then it goes through some more evolutions, modifications. Eventually the piano becomes what we know today. Talking about tickling the ivories, baby grand piano, upright piano, 88 keys on a full-size piano, A0 to C8. We're going to get there. It's going to be really cool, and it's just going to go like awesomely cool in the classical period where piano is really, really going to go big. But the main keyboard instruments of the Baroque, organ, clavichord, and harpsichord. I think it's, I'm trying to remember, I think maybe Bartolomeu Cristofori. I'm having trouble saying his name on my braces, but does start getting we get the piano at the tail end of the Baroque, but it doesn't quite hit until the classical. So organ, clavichord, and harpsichord, those are the main keyboard instruments of the Baroque era, really. Okay, so that the keyword question is number 19. Now for question 20, we are looking at what is the average cost for an original Stradivarius violin. It's a tough one because you're going to find a lot of different answers. If you were to Google this, you'd maybe find something different than what I would say. And even in the video that we watched in class, it does have some different numbers. I'm trying to find a number that makes sense based on all the research, not just that one singular video. And it looks to be probably around 3 to 4 million, but you'd be correct in saying some of them sold for 1 million, some of them sold for 2 million. I think the highest one is maybe 16 to 18 million for a Stradivarius, a string instrument or Stradivarius violin. But I'm giving you answer choices on an assessment that gives you, things that would be easy to kind of figure out. Like, was it $100? Was it 2 million? Was it 150,000? Or is 3 to 4 million more of a plausible range for something like this? And I think when you look at all the data, 3 to 4 million's probably the fairest. For all the different, articles, videos, research, that kind of thing. All right. So that's number 20, the average cost for an original Strad. 3 to 4 million is right around where we probably need to be. Okay. Question 21, opera. All this is, like when I say opera and you're in class with me live, I'm going to say, all right, class, define the word opera. And then you would say, well, Mr. S, opera is defined as a large-scale musical drama and it has multiple elements like, singers, musicians. Now, that doesn't necessarily give the full definition, but when we look at an opera is a large-scale musical drama. An opera does have singers. An opera does have scenery. An opera is going to have, there's going to be text, the text of the opera, the libretto, the person who writes the text, the librettist. You're going to have different kinds of, singing, whether like solo singer, duets, trios, maybe some larger group singing. You're going to have, you got a symphony orchestra playing with the opera. So there's a story that's going to come through in the opera. So you don't have to know every little detail necessarily about opera, but we want to know that opera is a large-scale musical drama, and you're combining these different elements like singers, musicians, scenery. There's going to be some kind of text that is the story, that's happening, and opera singers are moving around the scenery, and there's there could be stairs or a couch. Operas have arias. That songs that can pretty much be about anything and release the tension built up from the opera. You have operas that have the recitatives, or recitativo, however you want to say it. It's all good. I share in class the Leonard Bernstein video of him talking about how to understand how in an opera, when you're trying to move the plot forward, now you've got recitatives, these spoken-like or text-like dialogues that are helping move like the plot forward in the aria, where it's kind of releasing all that tension. You need a combination. And you're listening to opera music, you're hearing people kind of talk singing or sing talking, and it's like you're like, what is that? That's the recitative, And we've got some different versions of that basically that I talk about in class, and we use the music as examples to understand that. But knowing the basics of like what is involved in an opera, that kind of thing. Okay, pause for just a second here. A quick drink. The exam review is quite extensive. Oh, sorry, and thank you. I'll have to drink a little bit. Some just having some Barks root beer as I go through this. This is a lot of information, and I don't see you in the live class. So for anybody watching, whether you're watching for now, later, or this, maybe this video could be used for many moons. We'll see. All right. So know the components of opera, at least how in question 21, like what are some of the things that are in opera, so that you have a basic understanding of how all that's put together. If I think of anything else to add to opera, I'll come back and maybe reiterate opera, its definition, and maybe other elements. But I think you're getting the idea. I mean, goodness, on an A, B, C, or D, I may not be able to put every single detail of these longer-winded definitions. But let's go to 22. On question 22, this is more of a statement, and you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what is it? Now, the orchestral introduction heard at the beginning of an opera, this is called an overture. Now, you've heard me talk about this in class, that an overture is an instrumental introduction that happens before any action takes place, before any singers, come onto the stage. So when we say orchestral introduction heard at the beginning of an opera, we're talking about the orchestra, the symphony orchestra, the chamber group. We're talking about the orchestra is playing some kind of an intro. This overture is the introduction. The overture is what the orchestra plays before there are no arias and recitatives. That like the overture happens first. If the opera's got an overture, then that kicks it off, and then it leads us into where the overture basically dovetails right into whatever the first scene is, or whatever's going to happen for the opera singers and the scene. So keep that in mind. It's question 22. For question 23, I've already said what this is, but you heard me say the word aria. So an aria is a highly emotional song in an opera. I think maybe aria, if we were to Google that, maybe it'd be like Italian for air, maybe. But Aria is an emotional song, and aria is not always like a huggy song, a love song, an I miss you song. An aria can actually be on anything. It can be about love, death, misery, pain. It could be about hugs and kisses. An aria could be dark, mystic. An aria can be, sad, happy, gray, purple. An aria can be on or about anything. So we want to be careful about not just thinking it as one kind of thing, but emotional. Yeah, I mean, arias can release tension. Arias can be emotional. Arias can be on any topic and or subject. Okay, question 24. We're going to get into some Antonio Vivaldi. For those watching at this point, you want to make sure there is not an actual Vivaldi lecture. I do actually give a lecture in class on Vivaldi, but it's actually, when I talk about Vivaldi in the class, I am talking about, it's basically when I do the Baroque intro and overview, I incorporate Vivaldi into that one, as well as other composers, but I have a pretty decent chunk that is focused with Vivaldi interspersed with the Baroque intro and overview. So if you need the Vivaldi PowerPoint, that is going to be on the spring assignment. So if you remember when you did the Four Seasons, Antonio Vivaldi, and you scrolled down in Blackboard, I had an additional PowerPoint that went through, it was basically Viva Vivaldi. And then I also had a listening guide for the Four Seasons that, you want to, of course, be comfortable with because there's questions on that. So we want to know, make sure that you're visiting Vivaldi, make sure you're visiting that information for Vivaldi. So referencing on, find the journal that talks about, find the Four Seasons, find the spring journal, and you'll be able to get the PowerPoint there as well as the listening guide. Vivaldi's dates, which are also in the PowerPoint, an even easier or cooler thing is when you can navigate, the regular PowerPoints are, of course, listed. This is just an extra PowerPoint because it's just a real small, I put it on the side. I just did it that way. It's just kind of okay. At any rate, you get the idea. Vivaldi's dates are 1678 to 1741. This is question 24. All right, question 25. Vivaldi lived and worked in Venice. You're going to have Rome on your mind. It's not meant to trick you because of modern day times of what happened, we have a new pope and, they're from the United States and, they, from, I don't recall, maybe they were, from Chicago maybe, but I'm not meaning to put Florence, Venice, Rome, or other places to trick you. So don't be tricked by Rome because that might be in your mind from modern day news. Sometimes that can happen on these exams. We're not doing that to trick you. In this case, it's just a coincidence. But Vivaldi lived and worked in Venice. So let's keep that one straight, please. Question 26. Vivaldi was known as the Red Priest because he had red hair. He was ordained and he had red hair. So it might be kind of hard to find this online because of they're all wearing wigs. Can we spend some more time on the wig story? I don't ask you about the wig story, and we're not going to get into the wig story today on a review session. But we've talked about that in class, and I guess students are either entertained or they're like, wow, this is. Hopefully they're interested or entertained or just even more curious about layers of clothes and wigs and powdering and patronage and all the different things that happened in the time. But he did have red hair. Might be hard-pressed to find that example, but this is why it was called the Red Priest, red hair and ordained. All right, that was question 26. Let's go to question 27. On question 27, this Baroque composer was the master of the concerto and played virtuosic on violin. Well, we're talking about Antonio Vivaldi, of course. So Vivaldi was the Red Priest because of red hair and being ordained. Vivaldi is, lives and works in Venice. Vivaldi is 1678 to 1741. And when we look at on question 27, he's writing just hundreds of these wicked awesome concertos, and he could play virtuosic violin. Yes, we're still talking about Vivaldi. Absolutely. All right. Let's go over to absolute music versus program music. We've spent a lot of time talking about absolute music and program music. Really, absolute music, it's music, and program music has story or text. So with absolute music, for question 28, there's no pictorial or literary association. Absolute music, no pictorial or literary association. I'm stating that twice to make sure we feel good about that. Program music has story and text. It's about something. There is some kind of connection. So you want to know what compositions in class or discussed, whether it's you're in my face-to-face classes, my online classes, my hybrid classes. What are the compositions that I have discussed that are program music? There's a few of them. If I give you just a couple examples, the Four Seasons by Antonio Vivaldi. This is program music. You have the Italian sonnets, the poems that are written first. We think Vivaldi. We're not 100%, but we think probably he wrote the Italian sonnets, the poems, and then the music to kind of bring all that to life. But there's other songs that I referenced in class from other periods, of course, like Symphony Fantastique, Hector Berlioz, from a totally different period. So story and text, program music. And the thing about program music is there's story or text first, and the instruments need to bring that to life through the music. So it's program music is technically an instrumental thing. So you need some kind of text written first, and then the music gets written afterwards, and then the instrumental group, chamber group, the orchestra brings that story to life through their instruments. I hope that's kind of cool. So the Four Seasons, Antonio Vivaldi was one of the big ones, specifically for the Baroque era. All right. Question, let's see, and then, so your number 28 was absolute music. Number 29 is program music. Hopefully we feel good about that. Number 30, we're looking at the Four Seasons by Antonio Vivaldi, Spring Movement 1. And you want to know a big part of Spring Movement 1 is evokes animals and nature, and that it's in ritornello form. So the idea, like when you listen to Spring Movement 1, hopefully you can hear, the bird calls. Hopefully you can hear the murmuring brooks, thunder and lightning, maybe the breezy wind, or I don't know, springs, maybe the sound of a spring, say maybe in Aspen, Colorado. That's an example. And then you're comfortable with ritornello form, where you've got ritornello form where it's like orchestra plays the main melody of the piece, and then you've got the soloists, and the soloist will in this case play with in the beginning the bird calls are with the soloist in Spring Movement 1, as well as the concertmaster for first chair violinist, which we talked about in class. But the idea, like ritornello form, is an alternation of like the orchestra and the soloist. And ritornello is it's like the main melody theme section of the piece that will keep coming back again throughout the piece. We talked about that, and listen to the piece to get a little bit more of that. But we want to try to keep those things in mind with the Four Seasons, Antonio Vivaldi. That's question 30. Let's move over to question 31. We want to know which composer was born in Germany, studied in Italy, and spent much of his creative life in England. Well, this would be George Frederick Handel. George Frederick Handel did a lot of things, so I don't want to recap everything. It's, as I said in the beginning, the final exam for music appreciation review session. I talk about these things in other lecture videos for, some 30, 40 minutes. Some of them are, like an hour of me talking about Handel. But I will say that for all the things that Handel did for, writing stuff, for, writing stuff for kings, and all the event music that he wrote for kings, just all the cool stuff. Handel writes just a lot of music, tons and tons of music. And I think in class I talk about pay attention to like where composers were born, pay attention to where maybe they went and studied music or played in groups and kind of what instruments or, like what they did. And and then look at, maybe where they ended up. And this helps kind of trace the journey of like where they're born, where they studied, where they worked, and then where they end up, spending some of their creative time. And that's Handel is fascinating in that regard. So if you're hungry for more Handel, please reference my George Frederick Handel lecture, because I feel like, man, I could just talk about all the stuff he did in Italy all day long. But reference the other lectures if you're a passerby and like, I want to know more about that. So I don't want you to get tricked on the composer journeys. But for those passing by, hey, maybe you're more curious, and I'll leave a link to the Handel lecture video. So that was question 31 for the final exam. On question, say we're good. Yeah, we're good with question 30, 31. On question 32, maybe I'll miss a number, but you're getting the content anyway. On question 32, Handel's dates, 1685 to 1759. Try not to get these confused. We know that the Baroque period is 1600 to 1750. We know that J.S. Bach is 1685 to 1750. So you've got Baroque period 1600 to 1750, Handel 1685 to 1759, and Bach 1685 to 1750. So just try to keep all that stuff straight in your notes there. That's question 32, just making sure you're good with Handel's dates. All right. Question 33. So if I was in class with you, I'd be like, all right, for question so-and-so, this composition is called Water Music, written by Handel. And how would we describe that? Would it be Sonata da Camera? Would it be Concerto Grosso? Would it be orchestral, or if I can say orchestral suite? I gotta re-say that with my braces. Or would it be something else? I'll give you another option maybe. But Water Music by Handel, I think, is best described really as an orchestral suite. I know in class I talk about it as being event music. It was event music. I mean, listen, Water Music was written for, a king that wasn't really that popular and didn't want to speak, the language, wanted to stay in his own native tongue, at least for a bit of the time. We have records you already talked about in class about later on, the king actually does start doing some, there's writings where he does give in, but this event music, Water Music, it's like the king wants to win some favor, and it's like, hey, we're gonna have this. Handel's gonna he's gonna write this piece. We're gonna have the musicians' barge, the king's barge. Everyone gets on a boat and goes out and listens to the concert, and it does become a hit. It does actually win. The king some favor a little bit, and then I want to say maybe his native tongue was German, probably, and it's maybe he didn't want to speak language, the native language, didn't want to speak English, or didn't want to speak whatever the native language that people thought he should have spoke or whatever. At any rate, I talk about that history more in other. I could be missing the boat on some of this, but the important thing is, at least for this particular part, is Water Music by Handel is best described as an orchestral suite, and we look at this as event music. All right, so I'll correct anything later if I miss something, or you want to get the main content or body of all this. But that's number 33. Okay, for number 34, why is Handel's Messiah so popular in England and America today? Well, Handel's Messiah is so popular in England and America today. It's sung in English. Handel's Messiah, it's the first part, is appropriate for the Christmas season. Handel's Messiah combines vocal soloists, chorus, and orchestra. That's it. I can go on and on about it, but it's English, Christmas season, and you got soloist, chorus, and orchestra. It's popular in England and America, and those are the big things that help make it popular. So let's go over to Johann Sebastian Bach, and let's talk about Bach and some of the things that Bach did. This is, again, just as a refresher here. Um, and to get something to drink there. All right, enjoying some Barks root beer. Bach states, you've already heard me say this before, so I'll kind of just as a reminder. Question 35, Johann Sebastian Bach's dates, or Bach's, if I can say that today. Bach's dates are 1685 to 1750. We want to keep that on lockdown for question 35. On question 36, during his lifetime, Bach held the position of, well, a lot of positions. Bach was the cantor of St. Thomas's Church in Leipzig. Bach was a court organist and chamber musician to the Duke of Weimar. But Bach also was a court musician to a prince as well. So these are all positions that he held. That was question 36. Question 37. Bach was most famous in his day as a performer on organ. He played the organ. That what he's most that his most famous in his day as a performer on that instrument. I mean that was his instrument. I mean maybe I should reword the question and say like what was his main instrument, what was his primary instrument, and I suppose we could argue other historians on other things that he could play or do, but the organ was his mainstay. That's 37. Question 38. On question 38, how many children did Bach have? A lot, a whole lot. Was it 4? Was it 6? Was it 2? What I did is I put a range on the exam. Now you can look this up in Google. I'm sure you can find this in Groves Online, Music Dictionary. Any music appreciation textbook like Listening to Music, or maybe Professor Wright's book from Yale. There's tons of really great texts that are going to all have all this information, but I put the range 16 to 20 just to get you thinking about how like where did that fall? So did Bach have 18, 19? Well, I can tell you the exact number. I've already done that, but on the exam, I'm just trying to get you to think. Okay, did he have 4? Did he have 6? Did he have 2? Was was it 16 to 20? Now, the cool thing about like Bach's children is, at least this day, I could go to the internet and I could put in there, like how many, did what, you can find this out pretty easily, and it'll give you like a list of like how many the children that made it through, toddler or infancy, that kind of thing. So I'll give you a reference before I move on, but if I can find it quick enough. But it'll show, I'm not going to share that particular tab. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, while I'm live streaming, it's kind of things will, if I try to pull up other information, maybe it just moves a little bit too slow. But the range is what's going to be for me. I hope makes it a little bit easier. So I'll see if I can come back to the source so I can show that to you. So I'm trying to type it in here live, and then if I can show you, I will. But for you, just knowing, the range and you're good on that. Okay, let me go back to my assessment. You'll still be able to see that. Oh, wow. Sorry, pausing. A lot of people chime in on the chat. Sorry about that. I've never heard of this class in my life. Okay. Some passerbys. Is it AP? So the review I'm giving right now is for South Texas College, STC Music. This is a final exam review for music appreciation. It's basically it's a historical class that I teach the stories behind the music, the elements of music, Bach, Mozart. It's a ton of stuff. I can't give a full summation in the review, but we're appreciating music from different periods, different kinds of ways. Um, but this is just a straight up. This is a straight up college class. But I also have what is this? Sorry, clarination. Oh, thank you for stopping by, clarination. So this is in music appreciation. My basic approach is um, I teach the elements of music, and in the elements of music, I'll talk about Eminem, I'll talk about Mozart, I'll talk about Bach, I'll talk about Billie Eilish, Michael Jackson. I'll talk about all different kinds of music. I'll use basically musical artists and examples to bring to life all the vocabulary words. Like, I guess the best way to explain my class is I talk about music. For me, music appreciation is it's, the most important thing is to learn how to actively listen to music. And one of the questions on this exam is like, what's the most important thing to do in music appreciation? That's at the end of the exam, where that is one of the questions I actually ask. And for me in music appreciation, the most important thing to do in the course is learn how to actively listen to music. Whether or not we like the music, its mood is irrelevant. We want to learn in the course how to actively listen to music. And underneath that, it would be the stories behind the music. After that, it's the elements of music, which I would go melody, harmony, rhythm, dynamics, texture, form, instruments, and vocals. And after that, it'd be picking a few periods like the Baroque and the Classical, and then pick 3 to 5 composers from those periods who made some really amazing contributions and break down their stories and their music. So thanks for asking, clarination. But yeah, regular, straight-up college course that I teach. I will teach at STC, South Texas College. I'll teach online. I'll teach hybrid. And then I'll have, there can also be dual enrollment students that will take the course as well. So there's times where high school students will come to STC and take the class from me. And in some instances, depending on the semester, sometimes I'll go out to a school and teach. So I kind of do it all with this particular class. All right. So with the Bach children, Bach, we were looking at question 38, how many children did Bach have? So when you get to that part of the exam, yeah, he has, somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 children. And while I said earlier, you can Google exactly all the children, the point on the exam is to know like a roundabouts. And one of the reasons I say 16 to 20 is because in the past, it kind of took a long time to get to those like straight up numbers. Anybody can Google and say it was 19, it was 18, or they had 20 and they didn't all survive infancy. And you're correct. You're gonna find the number, but I'm just making sure you can get the range on question 38. That on the exam I'm not going to put the exact number. I'm going to put the 16 to 20 range. Extra points for you, I guess, if you can tell me in the chat box what's the exact number of Bach's children. Do I have to give you all the answers? But I was trying to find the source to let you read a little bit more. So I'm looking for the range on this one, not the exact number. On question 39, question 40, and question 41, I'm lagging here, sorry about that. So for question 39, 40, 41, let me make sure on 42. Okay, yeah, just 39, 40, 41. They're listening examples. I'm not going to play those in a live stream, but I will tell you that it's very important that for question 39, it's going to say music listening excerpt. And there's going to be a song. So, excuse me, I'm not going to say the exact song, but I'm going to tell you, in this part of the exam, in any part of the exam, there's going to be very specific songs. And they could be any number. One of the songs you need to make sure you listen to and be able to recognize is The Four Seasons, Spring, Movement 1, Antonio Vivaldi. You can mark that as 39 if you wish. On question number 40, we need to make sure we can recognize Messiah, Hallelujah Chorus, George Frederick Handel. Okay, so 39, Spring Vivaldi, 40, Hallelujah Chorus, Handel, and 41, Little Fugue in G minor, Johann Sebastian Bach, organ fugue. I mean, we say little fugue, that's the nickname, but it's the organ fugue in G minor. And keep in mind, for whenever you're listening to this, all these questions and answers get jumbled for everybody's exam when they're taking it in analog. Sorry. So just keep all that stuff in mind. The numbers I say are not relative to anybody's actual numbers. It's just the order I have them in for this session, okay? All right. 42. On question 42, I've been saying this all year. Who is the nucleus of the symphony orchestra? Well, the strings. The strings, violins, violas, cellos, our string-based, solo-based, like the strings are the nucleus of the symphony orchestra. So want to make sure we keep that on lockdown. Question 43. The classical period in music ranged approximately from 1750 to the 1820s. Let's make sure we keep that on lockdown. Question 44. This is a tough one. Are you ready? Where is the birth of the Viennese school and classical style? Is it in Bonn, Germany? Are we talking about Vienna, Austria? Are we talking about somewhere in Russia? Or is it maybe in London, England? Well, I think the Vienna, Austria probably gives it away, because when I'm asking where's the birth of the Viennese classical style, and then you hear me talking about Vienna, Austria, that's the connection I'm trying to get you to make. And when I spent a lot of time talking about this in class in terms of what was the hype for Vienna, Austria, and then the why and who were the composers, talking about, the Viennese classical style with, Mozart and Hayden and Beethoven and the draw to Austria. We want to make sure we're maintaining that connection as we move forward through the exam, the content, the ending of the course here. All right, so that was 44. All right, for question 45, if we had to put one word to the classical era, what would it be? Well, this is kind of a challenge. I talk about that one word would be simple, but then the argument in the live class discussion is like, well, Mr. S, Professor Ron, that music is anything but simple. How can we say that classical music is simple when, to me, like to students or to many people, the music sounds dense and complicated, and you're maybe struggling to understand this Mozart, Haydn, or Beethoven piece. But when you look at the art, the architecture, when you listen to the music from the late Baroque to the classical era, while technically I suppose you'd be correct that maybe Mozart's music is anything but simplistic in nature. Yes, I understand where you're coming from, and I'm with you. But when you compare the late polyphonic music, when we talk about the music in general, we say things like monophonic music, homophonic music, polyphonic music. Monophonic music is melody alone. Homophonic music is melody and chords. And polyphonic music is two or more melodies. So if we have monophonic, it's melody alone. Homophonic, melody and accompaniment, melody and melody and chords. And polyphonic, you get the two or more melody thing. And fugues, of course, would be an example of polyphonic music. And late Baroque is very polyphonic. Like fugues are like the thing, and Bach leads the way. And we get over to classical, and a lot of classical music is much more homophonic in nature. Melody and chords texture, you could say. That homophonic texture. And while, I get it, you're probably not going to listen to, a Mozart concerto go, that Mozart concerto, was mad simple, dude. But we're not saying easy, but I guess when you have something to compare it to, and I think that's the point I make in the lecture. And I suppose in a review, it's like, this is more information than you need probably for the review on. But the word I'm looking for is simple, but it's because of the compare and contrast to the late Baroque, to kind of the flow, style, and vibe of the classical period in terms of the music. So simple is the word we're looking for, but don't let that be confusing by any means. Okay, that was 45. Question 46. We want to remember, that there are things that are affecting music. So when you're digging into the times, so question 46 is about, okay, well, were there wars, were there revolutions, and then maybe which ones affected. So if I were to say, all right, class, of the following, which historical event did not have an impact on the classical era? Was it the Russian Revolution, the French Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, or the American Revolution? I don't know why I'm speaking in that voice, but I mean, if you're with me this long and trying to get all this down, I mean, hey, let's have a little fun. So, was there even a Russian Revolution? Where did all these revolutions actually happen? I'm trying to throw you a curveball on this Russian Revolution idea. So just be careful. Like, there's no Russian Revolution that has any kind of impact on the classical era. What was there an American Revolution? Yeah. Was there an Industrial Revolution? Yes. Was there a French Revolution? Well, I mean, probably need to study a little bit, but maybe all of these revolutions happened at different times. But we need to know which revolutions actually happened, and we need to know, did these revolutions have any kind of impact on the times? So the Russian Revolution is a curveball. I don't know if there was even one at that time. This is just me honestly throwing you a curveball. Hey, Russian Revolution? No, there's no impact on classical music. Even if there was one, there was, probably there wasn't. So either way, I mean, I will say that lots of countries do have their own internal struggles, revolutions, wars, but I'm trying to get you to focus on like the history of the time and how it either did impact the music or maybe it didn't. I mean, who knows? I mean, but typically, everything that's going on around outside of music will probably have some kind of impact on the arts. So that was 46. In 47, interest in Greek and Roman antiquity during the 18th century greatly influenced, painting, maybe sculpting, architecture, literature, music. I mean, the list could go on and on and on. So we want to keep that. In mind on number 47, question 47. Question 48. Music of the classical era is characterized by lyrical, singable melodies, diatonic harmony, and this is in a homophonic texture. That is absolutely true. Classical music is very singable. It's very memorable. It's indelible. It's diatonic. We talk about diatonic like it was in the key. It was all in. We're using all major and minor scales, Roman numerals, chords, melody and harmony, homophonic texture. That was the style and vibes of the times of the basics. But to really understand like lyrical, singable melodies, diatonic harmony, to really understand all that stuff, you got to go back and listen to, like Mozart piano concerto. You got to go back and listen to the music to really get a good sense of because I can say music is characterized by lyrical, singable melodies with diatonic harmony and a homophonic texture, but it doesn't really tell you enough if you don't have a musical sample or example to lean on. So I'm going to come back to that later towards the tail end of the exam with the musical samples that will help you understand the times better. But this is definitely true of the times in terms of the vibe and the style. That was question 48 on the classical music, how it's characterized. For question 49, we want to know that a string quartet, we're talking about 2 violins, a viola, and a cello. String quartet. And I'm going to go over to question 50 and then pause for just a second after question 50. So, question 50. Chamber music becomes a big thing in the classical era. There's so much really cool chamber music that exists in all times, and in the classical era, really chamber music takes off. So we want to remember, like, chamber music. It's it's small scale music. A great example of chamber music is what we just talked about. A string quartet. A string quartet is, a performing ensemble with, 2 violins, viola, and cello. A string quartet is also a musical form, like it's a music compositional form, where you'd have 4 Roman numerals, and it would be fast, slow, dance-like, and then fast again. So same thing we talk about. The strings are the nucleus of the symphony orchestra. Like we talk about, a symphony is a musical ensemble. When we talk about symphony is a music ensemble, or a symphony is a performing ensemble with strings, woodwinds, brass, and percussion. But a symphony is also a form of music with 4 Roman numerals: Roman numeral 1 fast, Roman numeral 2 slow, typically Roman numeral 3 dance-like, Roman numeral 4 fast. And the string quartet's the same thing. A string quartet is a performing ensemble, 2 violins, viola, cello. A string quartet also is, like, when we talk about multi-movement works, string quartets, like the form of a string quartet, typical form, is going to have the 4 Roman numeral vibe or flow, fast, slow, dance, fast. And if you can make those connections, it makes all this stuff in music appreciation a lot more fun, and hopefully a lot more enjoyable, a lot more fun, a lot easier. But a type of chamber music like string quartet is, of course, a type of chamber music. Duo sonata is a type of chamber music. So having some of those references to kind of help you along. Okay, so that takes us through the first 50 questions. I'm going to pause for just a second, another drink, and then we're going to pick up with question 51. Let me change the screen, so give me a second here. All right. We are going to make it to the end, I promise, and you'll have everything that you need. Okay. Grabbing some more notes, double checking a few things. Okay, slapping the desk, sorry about that. Okay. All right, thanks for staying with me, everybody. I'll come back to the chat box in a second. I know a lot of people just kind of finding the live stream, like going, hey, what is this? We're talking about music history. What's going on here? This is, well, I hope it's interesting anyway. All right. Okay. Yeah, just on a pause for just a second. All right. Bring this back. I'm going to double check the chat box. Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody, for chiming in there. Appreciate that. All right. Okay, let's keep it going here. Thanks, Strat. I just wanted to make sure I pull up my notes. I may edit that part out of the live stream later on, but for those that are watching, feel free to fast forward, skip ahead, that kind of thing. But want to make sure to, on a longer streams, have something to drink and double check notes and whatnot. So appreciate everybody. Let's keep this going. We need to move to the next part here, the next half. Question 51. So on question 51, a unique feature of a solo concerto is the cadenza. Now, we want to remember that, a solo concerto, solo concerto is an instrumental work where you are playing along with, a musical group like an orchestra. So the cadenza, at least in the classical times, would typically be at the end of movement 1. In modern day times, it's possible to be at the end of movement 1. It's also possible that it could be at the end of the last Roman numeral, depending on the time period. Concertos and sonatas, they're going to have different Roman numerals. A modern day concerto might have 4 Roman numerals. An older concerto might have 3 Roman numerals. We've talked about this in class on paying attention to how many Roman numerals based on maybe whether it's a, like symphony will typically have 4 Roman numerals, but there are some symphonies that have 5 Roman numerals. A sonata would have, say, 3 Roman numerals, and maybe a concerto would have three or four Roman numerals depending on the time period. But the cadenza, wherever it lies, is that virtuosic moment where it's just the soloist, whether it's a violin cadenza or whatever the cadenza is, and at the violinist they're just playing by themselves. It's like a virtuosic flashy flash of awesomeness. I mean, that's your cadenza. So it's a very unique feature of the solo concerto. Question 52. The system in which the aristocracy sponsored musicians is called patronage. So you're talking about in the patronage system, whether it's kings, queens, dukes, duchesses, princesses, etc., or just I guess in modern day patronage, where there's organizations or people that fund for musical groups of all sorts or whatever. But with the aristocracy and patronage, you had composers like Joseph Haydn, who worked for Prince Esterhazy for 29 to 30 years, and like they had a musical group and did some pretty amazing things and wrote tons of really cool music. So I want to be comfortable with the basics of patronage, the patronage system. Question 53. Mozart's dates. We want to know that Mozart is 1756 to 1791. Pretty basic, just knowing a few basic dates there. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Question 54. Mozart played which instruments? Well, Mozart played keyboard, violin. So whatever keyboard was in front of Mozart, he could play, but he could also play violin too. So that's important to know. That's question 54. Question 55. Excuse me. One of the first composers to include the triangle in a classical composition. Okay, so not the very first composer. Maybe he's the second composer. Certainly you could, but Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was one of the first composers to include the triangle in a classical composition. Although I think he may have been, maybe he was the second, third. I want to say he's probably the second, but he wasn't maybe not the very first, but he's among the first two or three composers to actually say, "Hey, I'm gonna put a triangle in this classical composition." So this is something that we're talking about in class. How like cymbals and bass drum and these different instruments from the Turkish Janissary bands made their way into Beethoven, Haydn, and Mozart's music. This is really cool. I mean, I talk about the history of this in class, and trying to recognize composers that slowly started adding these instruments. Of course, we move on down the line in history. Hector Berlioz really moves it forward, as do many, many other composers. Not enough time to give them all shout-outs here on this live stream, but Mozart gets the shout-out for the first group of composers for the triangle. So that's number 55. Question 56. Which composer rebelled against the patronage system and struggled to achieve financial independence? Well, there's a pretty long story that goes with this, but the short answer is Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart struggled, I should say he rebelled against the patronage system and did struggle to achieve financial independence. But when we say, was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart successful under the patronage system, the answer is kind of yes and no, because his dad, Leopold Mozart, helped him get the gig. And the internet and all the books and articles, it'll say, well, Mozart was unfiltered. Maybe he said stuff maybe that he shouldn't have said openly, possibly. Mozart was on tour when he was a kid and didn't get to play enough, and was just having too much of a blast in his 20s, maybe. I don't know. I mean, you got to kind of dig into that a little bit. But while yes, Mozart had an eidetic memory. Yes, Mozart had perfect pitch. Yes, Mozart went on tour probably before his legs could touch the ground of from the bench of the harpsichord, possibly. And yeah, some would say Mozart hits the parent lottery with his family and how awesome it was. And his sister Nan Earl was just incredible musician as well. But Mozart's dream, that when Mozart got the gig working under the patronage system, I wouldn't say he was not happy or dissatisfied. Maybe he was, but when he worked under patronage for the short time that he did, he wanted to do opera music and he just didn't have the hours. I mean, when you have a job, you've got to fulfill the job and the responsibilities and the duties. And Mozart's really big dream, he wanted to really have more time to stage and write operas. And so, however, he left the gig, whether he was actually dismissed, whether he was dismissed, fired, quit, resigned. I tell all the different versions of the story in the other lecture and the live class and my online videos, by all means, check those out. But you got to dig in. Please dig into that a little bit if you want. But the fact of the matter is, he did rebel, and it really comes from him being inspired and moved. But he really wanted to focus on opera writing, and if he would have stayed in the patronage system gig, we may have not gotten all the really cool, amazing, awesome operas that Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart would soon write. So that was question 56. And question 57, I've already pretty much given that. I talk about in class that, Mozart is considered today the face of child prodigy in classical music. And I try to get us to be thinking about, well, what are things that contributed to Mozart being considered the face of child prodigy in music? And in class, I talk about more specifically that, do you think that is Mozart a child prodigy in music? Is Mozart really the face of child prodigy in classical music? And more importantly, are there factual things that led to this mass opinion? And yeah, there are facts that lead into this. The fact of the matter is, he does go on tour at a very young age, the same as other artists like Michael Jackson going on tour. He does have an eidetic or photographic memory. He does have perfect pitch. Those are facts. He did attend a lot of concerts. He did stay up late and get up early. He did study all the masters before him. He was a very hard worker. Those are all factual things. I mean, I suppose you could say the hard worker is maybe an opinion, but eidetic is a fact. Perfect pitch is a fact. Going on tours as this is a fact. He definitely had some skills and gifts, whether they were a gift from above or developed, that are definitely factual. If you ferret out the photographic memory and perfect pitch, those are factual things. And it definitely gave him that, what you might call an unfair advantage, possibly. But, I mean, we all have unfair advantages, and they can be developed or they can be gifts, and he had his. I think the parent lottery, where you have such an awesome dad, Leopold Mozart, and mom. When I say parent lottery, and I know some teachers talk about this parent lottery idea, but it's meant to be a nice, happy, good thing, because when you compare and contrast Beethoven's father with Mozart's father, Beethoven's father was not that nice of a guy, and Beethoven had a really unhappy childhood with his dad, and Mozart has a happy childhood. So for Beethoven's father, Beethoven's father would, go out, hang out. Beethoven's father would get inebriated, would drink alcohol, and you come home and not so nice to the kids. Some just not a happy childhood for Beethoven. But Mozart's father it's like Father of the Year when you compare him to, say, Beethoven. So Beethoven, unhappy childhood. Mozart, happy childhood, led me to this, not just me, many of this parent lottery idea. But yeah, I mean, that's trying to separate, facts from maybe compare and contrast and ferreting out opinions as well. So some stuff to think about. Question 58, so question 57 was Mozart and child prodigy. On question 58, Leopold Mozart wrote a book, and the book is called The Violin School. At the time Leopold writes this, it does become really one of the best violin method books of the day. I'm just wanting you to remember that from when we talked about it in class, that Mozart, the whole point of this is Mozart didn't do it by himself. No one does. Mozart would send stuff to his sister Nannerl to kind of, hey, can you check out this piece for me? She was incredible. Well, I mean, of course he was going to check out his stuff. He trusted her very much. They grew up together, they played stuff together, they did concerts together. So when Mozart wanted some music to be like, hey, can you play through it for me? Nannerl would play through it for Mozart and give Wolfgang her thoughts on the music, and Leopold taught the kids everything, and so Mozart and Nannerl, I mean, they're very looked up to, of course, both mom and dad in all sorts of ways of awesomeness, So we're not here to discuss, was Leopold Mozart, just as genius as his son, or he was pretty darn awesome. That's for sure. We talk about that a little bit in the class, but Leopold writes this violin school, and it's a great method book. And he's raising his kids and teaching them theory and ear training and playing with them and taking them on tour and trying to help them find those opportunities. So we got to remind ourselves that like Mozart, looked up to his dad, and Mozart also was very he thought his dad was awesome, mom was awesome, and Mozart really thought his sister was world class and would always ask for her thoughts and ideas on some stuff. I think that's very, very cool. We got to make sure to remember him. That Mozart had help from other people and family and whatnot. That's 58. Question 59. Mozart dies while writing his Requiem Mass. I'm not sure that the movie Amadeus does justice in this part, because what's portrayed in the movie, if you ever watch it, it's not completely accurate. I haven't seen that movie in a while, but probably they had like a cloaked. I remember maybe a cloaked figure that you couldn't see to make it maybe more dramatic in the movie. But I think in real life, this is probably more from all the research that it wasn't as dark as the movie had actually made it when Mozart was writing the Requiem Mass. That he felt like it was that Mozart felt like it's like he was foreshadowing. He's writing a piece that he was just getting these weird vibes and feelings like, I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to finish this piece. I'm going to die before I finish this piece. And the movie probably really digs into that part a lot for Mozart. The movie Amadeus also digs into like, well, Antonio Salieri poisons Mozart. No, he didn't. That's from a play, and then the movie was made from the play. So that part is not true. But the part about the movie Amadeus, that the part about him kind of feeling like he's not feeling well, and he's feeling like that he's writing the piece that he's not going to be able to finish. He did die while writing it, and yes, it was sad. And when I heard that, when I was a student and learned that Mozart died 35, a little shy of his 36th birthday, I remember crying. Like, that was just really sad. Like, this was it hurt, because it makes you think about your own mortality and life, and you need to enjoy your life, but do your work, of course, too. But you got to have fun as well. So that part about Mozart and the Requiem Mass, there's some falsities, some fictions, but the part that is correct in the history, whether it's a movie, articles and things that you're going to hear wherever you get your information from, is that he didn't finish. He did die while writing the Requiem Mass, but it has been exaggerated and twisted. So be careful. Stay with me on that. On question 60, we're going to get into the next few questions about Haydn's dates. So really not just Haydn's dates, but Haydn's life and who he was and what he's all about. So for Joseph Haydn on 60, his dates are 1732 to 1809. Want to have that one on lockdown. We want to know on question 61, what instrument did Haydn play? And this is the challenge, because it's like he plays a lot of stuff. I mean, Haydn, we were talking like harpsichord, organ, violin, arguably, one of the horn instruments, maybe some drums, some other things. But Haydn also could sing. So Haydn definitely pretty darn talented for sure. For question 62, Haydn serves as a choir boy in Vienna, and this is what makes him kind of that triple threat of like, he can play like string instruments, keyboard instruments, he can sing. This definitely is a big determinant in like the awesomeness of his composition. I think lends, I don't know if I want to say lends more credence, or gets us to peer into why someone like Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart really looked up to Joseph Haydn. Haydn, Mozart would dedicate pieces to Haydn. Haydn would dedicate pieces to Mozart. And they just, they got along. Their times crossed a little bit. And I think there was some hanging out and playing for Haydn and Mozart. But the thing about all this is, Haydn writes, I think like 104 symphonies. 68 string quartets. And, Mozart's like, man, in his own words, he said many, many times, like, you know, um, I don't know if he said like no one can write a string quartet or symphony like Haydn, but there's many, many quotes of Mozart basically giving him shout outs and props of like Haydn really can write some like really amazing string quartets and symphonies. And I think particularly there's probably more quotes on the awesomeness of the string quartets that Mozart was like, man, this Haydn really writes some cool stuff. And in his own words, of course, I'm just I don't have those notes in front of me per se, but kind of giving you the raw thoughts and feelings of Mozart. Mozart looked up to Haydn, so and a big a model for him. So Haydn serving as a choir boy in Vienna, definitely being able to play keyboard instruments, string instruments. We think maybe, as I said earlier, that maybe Haydn dabbled in a horn. Maybe he ended up learning one of the horn instruments. Maybe he learned some percussion here and there. But Haydn's probably main things, keyboard, strings, and singing. But he was certainly multi-talented in instruments. Haydn played a really important role in the evolution of the string quartet, not just by writing 68 string quartets, but his style, his flow, his exploration of the kind of things that he wrote, really taking the string quartet style and how you write music in each of the Roman numerals. It's like he's the model, So it's a huge role in the evolution of the string quartet. That's number 63. 62 was choir boy. In 64, we want to know Haydn String Quartet, Opus 76, number 3. This was given the nickname Emperor because there's a slow movement that's it's based on a hymn written for the Emperor Franz Joseph. So we talked about that in class. This is also a composition you want to make sure you listen to because that might come up on a music listening example number so and so. So know Haydn String Quartet, even if you know Emperor String Quartet Haydn or Haydn Emperor String Quartet, you're good to go. You don't need me for the story. You could Google that if you want, but I talk about that in another video. We want to know that for 64. All right, 65. So for question 65, I've actually already said it like a few times already. How many string quartets did Haydn write? It's 68. When I go to question 66, I've actually said this, I don't know, quite a while ago. Who was Haydn's principal patron for question 66? The answer is Prince Esterhazy. So you've heard me talk about Prince Esterhazy before, so we're just trying to nail down the basics more than anything of who did Haydn work for 29, 30 years or so. I think it was 29 point something, But Haydn's principal patron, Prince Esterhazy. On question 67, and at this point in, I'll remind everyone on the live stream, remember, the question numbers are only relative to me sharing with you, but when you're taking my final exam, all the questions and answers are going to be jumbled, so just keep that in mind. And reiterating, finding the answer is more important than the answer itself, okay? We should be good on question 66 for his principal patron being Prince Esterhazy, and dial it into question 67. Haydn enjoyed phenomenal musical success with 2 trips to which country? Well, England, of course. So make sure we're remembering what we discussed about in class, where Joseph Haydn, he takes 2 trips to England. He writes his masterworks, the London symphonies. It's the last, big collection of pieces. I think that's probably the last 12 symphonies or so. And he's going there and playing them, and it's like they're a hit, So, England, London symphonies, very important. That's 67. Question 68. Who is the most successful composer under the patronage system in the classical era? You've been hearing me talk about this for a while. Joseph Haydn is the most successful, working for, 29. Maybe it's 30, but it's right around 29 to 30. Maybe it's 29 point something. But he works for 29 years or so under the patronage system. And Joseph Haydn is our most successful composer under the patronage system in the classical era, working for Prince Esterhazy. Okay, that was question 68. Question 69. Haydn's London Symphonies, the numbers. So the London Symphonies are 93 to 104. So you want to know those numbers. 93 to 104 are Haydn's London Symphonies. That's question 69. Question 70, how many symphonies did Haydn write? Looks like you've already heard me actually say this even before I got to this question, but Haydn writes 104 symphonies. You'll find on the internet, other places as in class, that, Wikipedia or other website sources, there's quite a few of them that are going to say 108. Historians are still arguing and ferreting it out. Are those other 3 or 4? And I didn't look before I got on the live stream to verify, okay, well, are they saying 106, 107, 108? I have dug in a little bit and saw, like, in terms of music history right now, we still agree on 104. So the other compilations or pieces that people are lumping together, that's still being looked into. So, I mean, this late in the live stream, if you're listening to this part and like questioning what the number is, we're still sticking with 104 at this time. Haydn writes 104 symphonies. So the other stuff that people are talking about, debating, that will probably go on for quite some time. But 104 symphonies, Haydn writes on question 70. Question 71. The nickname Father of the Symphony was earned by Joseph Haydn, not necessarily due to the sheer number, although I mentioned the clay pot story in class about, if you have, Group A and Group B, and Group A is told, no matter how many people, you got a group of people in Group A, a group of people in Group B, and it's like Group A is like, hey, I want you to, make one clay pot and make it like world class or whatever, and then the other group, it's like, I want you to make as many clay pots as possible, and then you get all the clay pots together or whatever, and like, well, which one's the best one? Now, that's a very simple version of a much cooler story and book that I could elaborate on more, but I'll leave a detail in the live stream if you want to get more into that. But the whole point of me sharing that super fast thing is, you write as many symphonies as Haydn does, you get really good at writing symphonies. Are all of the symphonies bangers? I can't say I honestly know every single one of Joseph Haydn's symphonies, but I know quite a bit of them, and they're pretty incredible. I've actually studied intently the masterworks, the final 12, the last 12. I took a whole class on Haydn years ago, and I have the masterworks, and they're incredible. And I've studied other ones, and I've seen in Haydn's music where there's messages and jokes in his music, and I'm always blown away by, oh, wow, I get that now. I wish I'd have got that, 20, 30 years ago. Kind of neat, kind of cool. But the father of the symphony, like with the stuff he did with the form, the messages in the music, the things he did with the instruments and bringing in new and different instruments, doubling the size of the orchestra at a certain point. The list goes on and on and on. Like it's not father because of the sheer number. There's so many things. The number helped, of course, to actually try a lot of new things and experiment. But you write 104 symphonies, and yeah, you can bring in other instruments. You can change orchestration. You can experiment with all these different kinds of things in, these symphonies. You can maybe put messages or jokes in your music, possibly theatrics in your music. There's a really long list of very specific things that he would do in his music. I mean, 2 examples of like, okay, what's a fatherly example? Okay, listen to Symphony 45, Movement 4. Watch it on YouTube, but don't look down. Watch it the entire time without looking down on Symphony 45, Movement 4. Tell me what you think. I'm curious. Okay, listen to Surprise Symphony Movement 2, and just listen, and tell me what you think. Like those are some examples. Those are 2 pretty easy peasy examples that'll get the ball rolling. All right. So Father of the Symphony. I want to go more on that, but I know I talk about that on a lecture, so I just want to get you thinking about the whole Father of the Symphony thing. So, all right, that's Father of the Symphony is question 71. All right, for question 72, we're just looking at Beethoven's dates, and we're going to go more into Beethoven at this point. But so Beethoven's dates on question 72, we're talking about 1770 to 1827. Very important to keep that on lockdown. Question 73. Beethoven's 17, plays for Mozart in Vienna. Mozart's blown away. Mozart is not easily impressed. It sounds like Beethoven impresses him at the time, and Beethoven improvises so well that Mozart says to his friends, keep an eye on him. He will make a noise in the world someday, or maybe he'll make a splash in the world someday, something along those lines. But that was actually said by Mozart. It's kind of cool. Um, Question 74, Beethoven and modified patronage. Ludwig van Beethoven and modified patronage. What is that? Well, modified patronage is Beethoven, while he did not work for under the patronage system as we knew it in the times, Beethoven would give music lessons and get paid. Beethoven would publish music and get paid. Beethoven would give public concerts and get paid, and people would just give him gifts. So when we look up, sorry, I can't talk. I need to grab another drink here. Sorry, Ann, thank you. When we look at Beethoven and modified patronage, it's music lessons, published music, public concerts, and gifts. And that's how Beethoven was able to live, work, eat, the whole 9 yards. Okay, that was 74. For question 75, Beethoven was born into a happy family that proved to be his greatest support. That is definitely false. That Beethoven was not born into a happy family, and it did not prove to be any kind of support. So when you're doing the exam, there's true and false, there's matching, there's A, B, C, or D. In some semesters, I do essays on midterms and finals. That kind of depends on your class, in the live class, if that applies to you. It would be on the syllabus, and I would talk about in the live class. But in this case, I'm trying to get you to kind of ferret out, is this true or false? Was Beethoven born into a happy family? No, it was not. Was Beethoven's family his greatest support? No, it was not. Beethoven had an unhappy childhood. So that was 75. Beethoven was not born into a happy family at all. Very unhappy family, very unhappy childhood for 75. On question 76, Beethoven suffered perhaps the most traumatic of all maladies for a musician, and this is deafness. I think probably he was born so we're looking at 1770. He probably started going deaf around 1796 or so. In the 1800s, the last part of his life, at least we know when Beethoven wrote Beethoven Symphony 9, and he had, and there's some other pieces he wrote in that time, but around the time of Beethoven 9, he was completely deaf. So, all right, that was 76, deafness. 77, this is, true or false, class? Beethoven was unable to compose music after he became deaf. Well, that is false. Even when he became deaf, he did actually compose some grand pieces and a couple masterworks, one of those masterworks being Beethoven's Symphony 9. Beethoven was actually able to compose music after he became deaf. Wasn't easy, but he did. That was question 77. Question 78. Beethoven, like Mozart, wrote music very quickly and with great ease. This is false. Beethoven did not write at the same ease that Mozart did. That's not to say that Mozart didn't revise, edit, or scratch necessarily, but for Mozart having perfect pitch and an eidetic memory, he surely had it easier than Beethoven. But then again, when you look at, say, Beethoven and writing, Symphony Number 9, and I suppose we could all Google this, we could read a bunch of books and find out, but, maybe Beethoven maybe Beethoven had perfect pitch or relative pitch to be able to write completely deaf. So, but I think Beethoven didn't write music as easily as Mozart, and that is what we're trying to get at here. So, Beethoven, like Mozart, wrote music very quickly and with great ease would be false. He did not write music quickly and with great ease the way Mozart did. That was 78. So 79, Beethoven is the bridge to the Romantic. Yeah, he is the bridge to the Romantic. And the question is always like, well, why can't we end the period at the passing death of Beethoven? I don't have a good answer to that question. I have students ask me that all the time, that why can't we end it in 1827? There's a lot more to it than that I can't necessarily talk about in a review session, but it is something I do talk about live with other composers involved in the period and the time and how it all works. But I can tell you, when you listen to pieces, if you were to listen to, say, Pathetique Sonata, Beethoven writes, that's really question number 80 is how many piano sonatas did Beethoven write? 32. That's question 80. But if I kind of take a look at question 79, question 80 on my notes here, in terms of Beethoven is the bridge to the Romantic period. Yes, Beethoven writes 32 piano sonatas. Okay, how am I lumping that together here and why? Well, he writes quite a few piano sonatas. They're incredible pieces. And if you listen to, say, Moonlight Sonata, you might listen to Moonlight Sonata Movement 1 and go, wow. In Moonlight Sonata Movement 1 by Ludwig van Beethoven, it breaks the mold. It's this slow movement that for many sound like sad or dark or mysterious. And then as it moves forward, by the time you get to Moonlight Sonata Movement 3, you're just like, whoa, you're blown away at like the happiness that's in there. And it's not that it's just necessarily a sad to happy journey. It's live. It's like music is life, life is music, and you hear joy and pain and suffering and all the inner turmoil that maybe anybody would encounter. You get a lot of this kind of stuff in Beethoven's music. And so if you listen to Moonlight Sonata, if you listen to Pathetique Sonata, if you listen to Für Elise, you might listen to the Für Elise piano music and go, wow, I hear that Für Elise to some people sounds like Für Elise opens with maybe a romantic-ish vibe, and then maybe it goes to a classical-ish vibe, and then romantic. You can find stuff in Beethoven's music and kind of dig into it to see like what you're feeling on that. You hear Moonlight Sonata and you get, there's passion, and maybe you hear like sadness. You get to the end and it's like just, joyous, possibly, or I don't know, maybe it sounds like a mountain trip or skiing in the third movement. There, no right or wrong answers necessarily, but I think I want to get you thinking about with Beethoven's style, like he's writing, symphonies and chamber music, and Beethoven's writing piano sonatas, and he's writing all this different kind of music, and there's just so much passion and emotion that comes through in his music. And this whole bridge to the Romantic period is basically Beethoven is writing a line or hovering between writing music in the classical style and writing music in a more romantic style. And in class, I try to talk about those compositions where you can listen and hear this is straight up classical, or this is, kind of going back and forth between, or this particular composition. I'll mention compositions in class that like this one is more of the romantic vibes or style. So hopefully it kind of gets you thinking on things to make connections with. So that's covering 79 and 80. Question 81, you've heard me say, how many symphonies did Beethoven write? Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies. Question 82, how many movements does Beethoven's Symphony No. 5 have? It has 4 movements. Question 83, Moonlight Sonata was given its title after Beethoven's death by the poet Ludwig Rellstab, who compared the piece to the moonlit scenery along Lake Lucerne in Switzerland. This we know to be true. So the part that maybe I don't know, other people don't know, is like, is it something where the poet was sitting down by the lake and the piece popped into his head, or did he hear the piece and then the lake, like, was it the music first or the scene first? Either way, it is a really cool story, and whether the poet knew the piece before he sat down or was at the lake, or whether he'd been to that particular spot or seen a picture, whatever the case may be in the story. We're always encapsulated by the stories, and the Moonlight Sonata actually kind of grabbed hold from the poet, really latching onto that, and it's kind of a neat thing in history when these things happen. So that was 83. And question 84, it's the message behind the Surprise Symphony. So in Haydn's Surprise Symphony, number 94, movement 2, you really need to be able to listen to this piece and try to like figure out, okay, well, what's the surprise? Is it like, are there crash cymbals? Is there some kind of message saying to be quiet, we're not done yet? Is there some kind of maybe loud chord in the opening? Maybe like, hey, signaling to wake up or don't fall asleep. Like like you're trying to figure out what's the surprise. So I don't want to give this one away necessarily, but if you've made it this far, really, if you listen to Haydn Symphony Number 94, Movement 2, what you're actually going to hear is like very soft in the beginning, and then out of nowhere you hear this loud chord in the opening. And I shared the story as to why he did it, but if I give you the short version as to why this actually happened, it was I think at the time one of his students, I want to say maybe it was Playal, one of Haydn's students was in town doing a concert series, and he had to kind of do something to get the audience excited about the music. There's lots of versions of the story, but what we do know is that his student Playal was in town doing a concert series, and we do know Haydn had his concert series overlapping with one of his protege students, or maybe former student, or whatever. And whether he told the orchestra he was going to do this, or he surprised the orchestra and surprised the audience, the loud chord happened. And the coolest thing about it is, like, we think probably that people cheered and like really dug it. It definitely got the audience on the edge of their seat from this, loud chord idea. I know, an interesting story, right? To say the least. So, that the surprise symphony one was question 84. On question 85, you want to know, how did Haydn's military symphony earn its nickname? And I know I talked about this quite a bit ago, but the big thing about the military symphony is Haydn's military symphony, it uses percussion instruments associated with Turkish military music. So, if you were to watch a video or listen to the music, like, you're going to hear, you're going to hear some different things in the music. So, you get to hear, like, whoa, like there's some like percussion instruments actually, entering the orchestra. So, and maybe I could, if I play it, it's going to show it. I don't want to have an issue with playing it on the live stream. But, composers like, Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, they were looking like, hey, okay, cool, let's put cymbals in the music. Oh, man, maybe we can put like some kind of, bass drum and cymbals and triangle. Like, they just start looking at putting these other percussion instruments in their music. And in Haydn's military symphony, which is really interesting, because in the military symphony, the movement that is military-ish, that has all this military stuff in it, it also breaks the mold or the grain, because Haydn's military symphony, it's Symphony Number 100, military symphony, but where you have all the percussion, military stuff, and then the trumpet fanfare is going to be, that's the military part, is movement 2. So another break in the mold of musical form, as well as adding some percussion instruments. Kind of neat. So that's question 85. Let me grab some water real quick, and we're almost to the end. Okay. So for question 86, night music. We did an assignment on night music. You should feel really good about it at this point. For night music, we want to know that when you look at the original, you want to know the original name of night music. Sure, you want to know the German, you want to know the name, but as long as you know night music, or if you know a little night music, you want to know that night music, a little night music, it's by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and that it's a serenade for strings. If you know night music, a little night music, serenade for strings, event music, you're good to go and be able to recognize the main melody from the piece within a few seconds. I know in class, we actually played night music and tried to figure out like where the levels were. Like we found the first note and then found out, okay, did the second note go up or down? Did the third note go up or down? We did an experiment in most of my classes, and I typically do that kind of stuff to get you to listen, to find like where everything is sitting. So knowing a little bit about night music for question 86. On question 87, you want to know Mozart's Piano Concerto number 17 in G major. And you want to know that it was written for Barbara von Ployer, one of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart's protege students. And you want to know, like, be able to recognize, the first minute or so of the music, like the main melody of the piece. You want to have that on lockdown as well. So Mozart Piano Concerto number 17, G major, written for Barbara von Ployer, and recognize the music for question 87. For question 88, it's about Beethoven Symphony 9. What's important about Beethoven Symphony 9 is its nickname, the Choral Symphony, due to the incorporation of the choir in movement 4. So make sure that you listen to Beethoven Symphony 9, the fourth movement, where you hear like singers. You want to make sure that you actually hear the. Pay attention to the soloist, like you've got the soloist that you're going to see and hear, as well as the full-on choir. So you want to have that, be comfortable with Beethoven Symphony 9, the fourth movement, and the singers, the choir. All right, that was question 88. All right, for question 89, question 90, question 91, these are listening excerpts, but again, the numbers aren't relative, as I said before. This is, everything's going to get mixed and jumbled. But for the next three in the review, they're all listening. So I want to reiterate the musical compositions you're required to actually recognize. It'll say music listening excerpt, and you'll have to pick, is it A, B, C, or D? So when you take the final exam, make sure you have headphones, and make sure you set the volumes, because you'll be using honor lock. So you have to have your headphones and your volume set before you launch honor lock. Otherwise, you won't be able to make any changes. And you'll press play where it says music listening excerpt, if I can talk, music listening excerpt, and you'll have to identify very particular pieces. The pieces for the classical period that are on your study list are going to be Mozart, Piano Concerto number 21, Movement 2. This might be familiar from, say, like Little Einsteins. The other composition, that was for 89. For question 90, we're looking at the Pathetique Sonata, and I would say Movement 1. For question 91, we were looking at Beethoven Piano Sonata in C-sharp minor, Opus 27, Moonlight Sonata for shorthand. You know the first movement. You want to be familiar with that, and you're good to go for 91. So those are your listening excerpts. You have 3 listening excerpts for Baroque, 3 listening excerpts for the classical period. So 6 total. And obviously the time period dates and composer dates, 8 dates, 6 songs. Keep all these things organized, please. All right, question 92. What was the quote used at the open of the video lecture, Music Appreciation Lecture 11, Classical Chamber Music, Haydn and Mozart? Well, there's so many quotes. I know this is going to get kind of tough. So what I recommend in all the quotes from the live classes, if you're in my live face-to-face class, I say all of the quotes as a part of the lecture. It's kind of your job to write them down, and I mention how important I feel like the quotes are, because the quotes help you kind of peer into the mind of the people of the times, whether it be a composer, a philosopher, or an artist, whoever they were. In this case, in this particular quote, I said, "You listen to 4 sensible persons conversing. You profit from their discourse, and you get to know their several instruments." This is a very important quote that I wanted you to remember from Music Appreciation Lecture 11. That's number 92. Okay, question 93. Vocabulary words. There's a lot of vocabulary words. So in this one, 93 is actually kind of got a lot. We've got divertimento, serenade, opera, opera buffet, opera seria, singspell. Golly, I hope I'm saying all that right. But for divertimento is a classical instrumental genre for chamber music or soloists, often performed as light entertainment. A serenade is a classical instrumental genre that combines elements of chamber music and symphony, often performed in the evening or at social functions. Opera buffet, or we could say Italian comic opera. Opera seria, Italian serious opera. Singspell is a lighter form of German opera that included spoken dialogue. All right, that was all the vocabulary words. This is a matching that you're going to come across on the exam. That was question 93 in the review. Question 94 in the review. Match the terms related to string quartet form. So movement 1, sonata allegro. Movement 2 is an ABA, or theme and variations. And in the string quartet form for movement 3, it's dance related, and maybe you'll have like a minuet and trio. And then movement 4, sonata allegro, or you might have a rondo form. So your sonata allegro, where your sonata allegro, you're going to have some exposition, development, recapitulation. Your rondo, you're going to have like an ABA, CABA, ABA, CADA, something like that. But we're talking about string quartet form, Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, and the forms that kind of go along with that. That's question 94. All right. Question 95 it's about a quote again. So in Music Appreciation Lecture 13, Classical Concerto and Sonata, I talk about in the class, I say, give me the best instrument in Europe, but listeners who understand nothing or do not wish to understand and who do not feel with me in what I am playing, and all my pleasure is spoilt. So it's one of the big quotes that I talk about in the lecture. So you're trying to remember that. Yes, certainly would be good to know, like, for some of these, I'm not telling you all the people that said the quotes. I need to leave some of that to you on the review session to look up some of these things. But it should be, obvious if I'm saying, like, if I just say what quote was mentioned by Mozart in Music Appreciation Lecture 13, it's like, okay, if you're really listening, it's like, well, this Mozart said, give me the best. I mean, even if I didn't say Mozart, I could just say what quote did I say in Music Appreciation Lecture 13, Classical Concerto and Sonata. It's as soon as you see or hear Mozart, or even if I say Music Appreciation Lecture 13, Classical Concerto and Sonata, Mozart and Beethoven, it's pretty. You can pretty quickly come to the conclusion that that doesn't sound like something that Beethoven would say. That had to be in Mozart. So you can figure out. Now, some of the quotes I share are actually from philosophers or other people of the times, but most of the quotes are coming from the artist. But there's a few that are not. So I would make sure, as I've said in my class, make sure you know the quote, but actually who wrote the quote as well. That was question 95. 96. This musician was blind. Her name was Maria Teresa von Paradis. Blind composer. And I think this composer, one of the leading female, amazing, awesome composer of the time that I think probably memorized, 40, 50, 60, maybe as many as 60 concertos in her head. Pretty incredible. Blind musician that just had the memory of just a virtuosic awesomeness, really. Maria Teresa von Paradis, blind musician, had an amazing memory as well. And cool, very, just fabulous musician. Fabulous. That was 96. Question 97. What Mozart composition discussed in the video lecture was featured on a cartoon show for kids? I don't mean that to be ambiguous. I think I'm just trying to get you to remember when I talked about, this really comes from the live class, to say, because it's like, well, which video lecture are you talking about? But I suppose I could rephrase that. It's not just a video lecture. I talk about Mozart and Little Einsteins in multiple classes, but not just Mozart and Little Einsteins. I talk about different TV shows and movies that use different compositions we study in class. Little Einsteins is just one example of Mozart Piano Concerto Number 21, Movement 2. And so I'm trying to get you to, like, were you paying attention in class? I'm trying to get you to critically think and make connections without giving it away too easily, basically. That was question 97. On question 98, the most important thing to learn in music appreciation that I emphasize in every lecture is to actively listen to the music. That's the important thing. That's what I'm looking for. In question 99, it's like, what? Sonata, okay. I've talked about sonatas and concertos, but reiterating another one of the vocabulary words, it does kind of get missed a lot. But a sonata, it's an instrumental work for one or two instruments consisting of 3 or 4 contrasting movements. So sonatas are instrumental works that they could either be 3 or 4 Roman numerals, depending on the period and or composer. And sonatas can also be like a single sonata or a duo sonata or something like that. A concerto is an instrumental work, but is with a musical group like an orchestra. So just try to keep those things straight, because it's a lot of things to remember, I know. That's why I'm doing a review session, so that if you need it, it's here. And if you don't need it, you won't be here. If you're listening to this, you need it. Anybody that watches this or listens to this, it's because you need it. It's not an obligation. It's not a requirement. I'm doing this for you, for anybody that ever needs it. So we go to the final question and then my summary here. Okay, so question 100. Question question 98 was what, actively listening to music. Question 99 was sonata. And the final question of the review session before the summary is music appreciation is a fun class as long as you do the work. True or false? Well, of course, I would hope the answer has to be true. So that's everything on the review. I'll check the comment box and give my summation. I talked earlier a lot about Bach. I do think it was probably 20 children for Bach. We were talking about that a long time ago. I put the range 16 to 20. I think 20 children. What I was trying to do earlier with Bach is see if I could just put a list in the chat box. But I think what I was saying earlier about Bach, people had talked about, because it took a while to, get all that on records and birth and death certificates. But I think there's a couple questions on the exam maybe that I'll reword or give some curve or extra credit points to. So I'll remember that from this stream on things that I can fix or make better. But because it does take time to get all the records, some of, basically between Bach's two marriages, 20 children on the quiz, I'm looking for 16 to 20, because it did take years to kind of get all the paperwork in order to get all the names and all that stuff, all on the money. At any rate, that was something from a while ago in the review stream. So that's it with that. Let me close that and see if there's any other stuff. Check in the chat box. Again, thanks for everybody who chimed in on the chat box. I think I addressed all the chats of people that chimed in. So I really appreciate that. For those that chimed in on the chat box, thank you so much. For everybody that attended live, I really mean that. Thank you so much. It's nice to have an audience to share stuff. It's kind of exciting to share stuff with an audience. But even if it's an audience of 0 or an audience of 50, 100, 20, 10, 8, to me it doesn't matter the audience number. It just matters to me if I make a video about music history, music appreciation, that it helps students. I just want to help students. So if this video helps, awesome. If you need it, awesome. If you don't need it, that's awesome too. I'll recap what I said in the very beginning of the live stream is just get yourself organized. In the beginning of the live stream, I said some basic things of if you have good lecture notes, then make a vocabulary list, number 1. Number 2, get the stories behind the music. Number 3, listening guides. Make sure you access those. Number 4, make sure you have your musical samples on lockdown. And number 5, know the quotes and who wrote them. This stuff is really, really important. Your ed puzzles, they have pretty much all the questions aside from Padlets and journals and class discussions that, the midterm and final exam do have questions testing your knowledge of the Padlets and journals, where the ed puzzles don't test on Padlets and journals. The ed puzzles are all based on video lectures, not the assignments. So when you do take the final exam, it does have questions that show your understanding of the actual assignments in the course. Remember, the ed puzzles are all the lectures. If you're in my online or hybrid course, or you're in my face-to-face and you're going back to watch lectures, they're all basically mini lectures. So when I do an ed puzzle, it's quizzing on that actual video, not the assignments that are maybe connected to the lecture. So if you keep all that in mind, you're going to do really, really awesome. And I can see that as I've gone through this review and this live stream that there's a couple questions I need to amend, edit, change, that kind of thing. So good to kind of work it through with my students. But with that being said, hey, thanks for attending the music appreciation final exam review session with Professor Ron. I really hope this helps everybody. I always have a great time talking about music history and funness with all my students. Have a awesome night, great weekend. I want to wish everyone the best of luck on all of your final exams. And remember, enjoy your life, enjoy the music, and if you need help, just, don't hesitate to reach out and ask. We're here to help you, okay? All right, we'll see you. Bye, everybody.